Welcome to Restore the Glory podcast. My name is Jake Kim.
And I'm Bob Schutz.
We're two Catholic therapists sharing what we've learned personally and professionally to help you on the journey of restoration. If you've been blessed by our podcast, please prayerfully consider partnering with us on Patreon. Your support will help cover the cost to produce the podcast, but will also give you access to exclusive content like monthly reflections and special live stream teachings. Go to patreon.com/restoretheglory and join the mission of experiencing the restoration of our God-given glory. Hey, Bob. It's good to be back with you again. We're in our series here on sexual healing, and hope you're doing well. But we have a really special guest with us, Matt Fradd. Matt, it's great to have you on the podcast. Thanks for agreeing to be with us, and we're excited to dive in with you today. So welcome to Restore the Glory.
Thanks, Jake.
I'm just curious, I think you guys know each other better than Matt. You and I met once at a conference we were both speaking at. But I'm curious, have you spoken together, I imagine, at conferences and things?
No, we haven't. I met Bob when I went to the Restoring the Glory course probably 2 years ago now, just about.
Very cool. That's awesome. So those are, in case our listeners don't know, those are courses that Bob puts on. Periodically, I'll join him for the priests and seminarians one. Just awesome stuff that diving into your own heart is basically like taking this podcast in a week through a fire hose of goodness.
I think it was the most powerful retreat experience I've ever had in my life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's really powerful. Why don't we just, if you're okay to share, like what were some of the highlights that jumped out to you when you were at the retreat that just moved your heart?
It was all the Lord's. I remember it was really just kind of where the Lord had led me in that part of my journey. I think that made it so powerful that he was kind of preparing my heart even weeks before I knew that I was going to attend the retreat. It was Sister Miriam James who invited me. And I had certain things had happened that led me to think, okay, it's time to get serious. I need to go on this thing. Mm-hmm. But I think one of the things I was so impressed about was how low key it was. I mean, it was in the basement of a church. You know, there was no sense in which you felt you were being manipulated with lights and smoke machines and soothing music. It was like, here, let's get together and encounter the Lord together. And there was something about that I don't know, that in my mind added to the authenticity of it. And it was exceptional. I just sensed the Lord telling me, lay back. This is surgery. Nothing is required of you.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful analogy of what it's like. Bob, do you remember that as well?
I remember that time when Matt came.
Yeah, that time.
Oh, yeah. I definitely remember.
Yeah.
And we interacted a few times. I was just desiring to give him space and allow him to be with the Lord. And it was just a gift to see how much he entered in and the grace that's come from that.
Yeah. Matt, I just want to bless you and affirm you, because I think I find, and you probably find it, Bob, I know you and I have touched base about this, that it's so common for those of us in ministry to stay kind of in the upfront spot and not to pull back and say, hey, I need to address the dynamics in my own heart and life. And it's, I think, easy for us to stay in the comfortable positions. And for you to have the courage really to go, I need to dive into my own story. Like, I really appreciate that. I think especially when we think about leaders and the leaders in the church, and like, man, is that so important. I know I've needed that over the years. I know Bob does and has needed that. And so I just want to affirm you. Well done for having the courage to do that.
Well, yeah, thank you. It's an ongoing process, of course, but I remember showing up at that conference and for whatever reason, just kind of didn't expect that anybody there would know who I was. That wasn't the case. A lot of people approached me, but most of the time they approached me, I was crying. So, so that'll teach them.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's so good. So today we're wanting to dive in, I think, in particular, to the area of sexual healing and the healing of sexual wounds, the healing of sexual compulsion. And listeners, our faithful listeners, you'll know that this is very much my story and has been a major part of my story and struggle. If you can hear all that when Heather, my wife, and I shared a few podcasts back. But Matt, we'd love to hear a bit about your story in this, because I've known you from the point of view of you helping people with all the things that you've done and all of that. And I personally, I find it so much more, I'm way more open to someone who says, can I help you? Because I understand that world. I understand the struggle. And then so I'm assuming, because the statistics are extremely high, that all of us have struggled to some degree in those areas. And then I'm assuming that launched you into helping other people with it. Is that fair to say? I don't want to presume.
Oh, indeed. Yeah.
Yeah. And so tell us a bit about that. Tell us a bit about your journey and your story with that. Yeah, I'll let you share just to the degree you're comfortable.
I think the first time I saw pornography, I was about 8 years old, playing out the back of a relative's house. And I was in the shed, and there was a wooden trunk that I opened, and I saw a centerfold. I remember that just sort of gripping me. I think even prior to that, though, I was engaged in masturbation as a way to sort of soothe at a very young age, actually, like maybe 7 or 6. It wasn't long after finding that magazine that my friend and I would begin stealing magazines from the local newspaper store. This is pre-internet, of course, or trying to find a friend's dad who hid porn mags in a shoebox in his closet or something like that. But it's soon, my best friend, it was soon discovered that his mother had no problem with us looking at pornography. So in the beginning, we were kind of hiding these things. We even went to the point of putting them in a black plastic bag and digging a hole in the backyard and hiding them there.
Oh, my word. Wow.
But I forget how it happened. At about the age of 12, it became aware that this friend's mum had no problem with it. And she was a single parent. He was a single child. And so she would actually buy us porn, like even at the age of 13 and on, from like a VHS porn from different stores. My parents didn't know about that. She never said, don't say this. But it was just sort of understood that I would never say that. So I stayed at his house, I'd say at least once a month. I would sleep over his house regularly. And then whenever we did, she would buy us, whenever we asked, which was whenever I was there, pornography, and then also like hard liquor. Like she'd buy us vodka, whatever, bourbon that we pretended to like. So that was sort of how I got into watching porn.
Wow.
Yeah, can you share a little bit, Matt, about kind of the family circumstances where that became an open door for you and what influence that might have?
What do you mean the family circumstances?
Like where was that meeting a need for you? It wasn't being met otherwise.
Well, I think I could probably speak superficially and then maybe more to your point. I think part of it was just like it was incredibly exciting. Sexuality, sexual desire, what men and women do together is naturally provocative and exciting. And so there's that sense in which, even if all of my needs were met, I'm not sure I would have said no. But I think it's fair to say that in my own household, I felt like I was always sort of in trouble with my mum and dad, that I was sort of a bit of a problem child. That frequently it just felt like my dad was angry at me. Almost like I couldn't help but annoy people and get, and to be fair, I may have been doing things that were objectively annoying or problematic or even wrong, but that's just sort of how I felt. I just sort of felt like a bit of a bad kid. So looking back, I suppose I would speculate that pornography became a sort of pacifier for me. when I was in trouble, when I got bad grades, when I didn't feel attractive to other girls, like I certainly, no girls ever sort of showed me interest throughout most of my teenage years till I was about 16. I just kind of felt like a freckly, weak kid, and so pornography, I suppose, both made me feel calmer, and it was just this powerful pleasure, and then the fantasy that went along with it, no doubt, made me feel powerful where I felt weak, perhaps.
Yeah. And would you say that starting masturbation earlier at 5 and 6 was soothing you from a lot of that pain?
Yeah, I think so. It's funny, like I know different children are different. Like certain children, even if they're not exposed to anything sexual, are sort of interested in sexual things, perhaps. I mean, I don't know, but I'm only talking from my own experience of having my own children who don't see, like my oldest child. I'll sometimes, he's about 13. I'll be walking down the street and I'll see a woman who's wearing a lot less than perhaps she should, and I'll look at him and notice that he's not even noticing. Like it didn't even occur to him. Whereas I think, from the age of about 6, I remember thinking of, this is really interesting. Like even Catwoman in the old, very, very, very old, cheesy Batman. I remember as a young kid, about 5, I took a VHS cassette of a cartoon I used to like down to the shed, and I broke it open with a hammer because I wanted to meet that beautiful girl.
Wow.
That I really liked. And that's just a lovely thing. I didn't realize how lovely it was, but it may not have been a sexual thing, but yeah, like often the masturbation was accompanied with maybe non-sexual imagery in my mind as a child, but I have that kind of, I don't know. Yeah, there was something there.
Matt, you're doing I feel like just a beautiful job of distinguishing two like really powerful things in this whole domain of sexual healing. And that's desire, and then the compulsions that usually come in response to unmet desire. Because for people who don't know just what is a compulsion, it's a repeated attempt to make something better, right? And like, I'm going to do this action repeatedly to try to make it better. Most people hear it with obsessive compulsive disorder. You obsess about something, then you compulsively try to make it better. So it's just an action or something we do to make it better. But Matt, some of the stuff you're nuancing is just, it actually moves my heart, because I'm right there with you, where there's, Catwoman or whoever your childhood, sweetheart was, who, it's like you've got your sports figure, but a lot of kids, they have their, wow, she's so pretty and so beautiful. If anybody have ever seen the movie Sandlot, it's a baseball movie. That is a great depiction of that little kid's obsession with the lifeguard girl. But I love the distinction that you're making, because I think it's notorious for us to just throw all of it under the bus and say all of it is bad. And it's just such a beautiful, simple image of you trying to break open the VHS because you wanted to find her. Like your heart, your desire for her is just so powerful. And I think that's so good. And then when the compulsion kicks in, can we circle back for a minute? Because I'm just stunned that it was a woman, an adult woman, who bought you and kind of provided this distortion. Like, that must have been a real twist of the heart and mind experience. Because I guess I would stereotypically say, oh, for sure it would have been the dad in that scenario.
Yeah.
But it was the mom.
Yeah, I haven't really fully thought through the implications of perhaps how that affected me and how I viewed women, and how I came to understand the apparent legitimacy of pornography. So more work maybe needs to be done there. But what was interesting is, like, she was wonderful in many respects. Right. She had become sort of a second mother to me. So, when you were a kid and there were parents who were just like polite but disinterested. Like, okay, hi, it's lovely to see you. Why don't you go and play on the trampoline? And then maybe you were blessed enough to have someone in your life who was like, how are you? That was this woman. I mean, she was just beautiful, and I love her still. And it's come full circle in a sense, because later on in my life, into my marriage, I asked her to ask my forgiveness about this. We could get into that later if you want, but But yeah, it was kind of strange. I mean, she was kind of a self-declared feminist at the time. I'm sure if you were to ask her, she may have said something like pornography is empowering to women, and maybe she had some wrong-headed notion that it was better that her child and child's friend be open about the things they were engaging in than to do it behind her back. I'm not sure.
So I hear you that it's not like you've pressed into that, but I can imagine that if you're longing for the love and care of a woman, and which I think everybody does, especially in a motherly sense, and then in a spouse, that would have been quite a message for her to send. Like you said it well. It seems like it almost confirmed that this is kind of okay, right? I could just see it being very subtle. Like, did you ever have like an experience of this as wrong? It almost sounds like you did, but then
I was embarrassed. Like, I think when my friend and I would watch pornography, I would masturbate while watching pornography, but I didn't know that he was doing that. I wasn't sure that this was something that necessarily accompanied the watching of pornography. So that was very embarrassing to me. If that was discovered, I would have felt very embarrassed. As far as pornography, I would have felt, I would have been scared that I'd get in trouble. I hadn't really thought through whether this was wrong or not. I suppose I just saw it as something people do that can be okay, and I probably would have tried to justify it as I grew older.
Yeah. Where did all that lead? So, I mean, we've gotten a sense of some of the early dynamics, and I guess we could press into mom and dad. But again, I want to respect that this isn't a therapy session. We're talking about you're being very frank and having I really appreciate your vulnerability. Where did this lead? Like in your, so this is happening. You're pretty young. Like, what happens later on in the next few years of life?
Yeah, I mean,
in these areas?
The internet came in when I was about 16. Australia technology was a little slower than here in the States, so I was about 16. I remember when it came in, it became, pornography became a thing, and you could watch online, and we would have those little discs, hard floppy discs or whatever, that you would fill up with and watch. And so I had my first sort of romantic relationship when I was 16, and just, God forgive me, imposed upon this lovely girl those sexual fantasies that pornography had taught me, just wanting to sort of replicate in that relationship what I had seen in pornography. And but then it was around, so that's, and then we went to some strip clubs as teenagers. But as far as like behaviors, like that's all that happened. I mean, that's enough, isn't it? But it's, and then when I was 17, I had a conversion to Christianity, and but yeah, like on the outside, that's kind of what happened. I think pornography teaches us a lie that goes deeper than most of us think. I think for most of us, even when we've decided that pornography was false and taught us false things, we still don't know the half of it. And that lie usually sort of bears itself as we enter a more intimate and loving sexual relationship with somebody, like I did with my lovely wife. We got married when I was 22. And you just sort of begin to realize that, to quote Jason Everett, pornography is not marriage is not the fulfillment of pornography. Pornography is the distortion of love.
Wow.
Yeah, it's good. Just, if you will, Matt, just for a second, talk about the conversion experience and then what the impact that was in terms of your awareness.
So when I was about 15, I suppose, I think I stopped going to mass whenever I could, even though my mum was the one who would take us there. I decided I was agnostic, still interested in deep questions, so even kind of dabbling in some like new age things that this same woman actually would give me, tapes and things, how to meditate and things like that. I always found myself to be, and probably was, more interesting than my peers, who seemed completely uninterested in things like that and in things like the deep questions of life. But so I was in a pretty dark place. Like I would even sort of write these pretty aggressive suicide poems and things, in my teenage angsty years. And I don't think I meant any of them, but I enjoyed the shock it gave, perhaps my mum in particular. I would dress all in black and just sort of take on that persona of a sort of upset, sort of conflicted teenager. When I was 17 years old, my mum came home from Mass and told me about World Youth Day, which was something that somebody had spoken about at that church. And I didn't know what that was. She told me it was in Rome, Italy, and that millions of people would go. It's like a young person thing. Would I like to go? And I mean, obviously, I was just on board because just the idea of experiencing another country, it was just remarkable. And being in Australia, everything feels so far away. So it was a very, very long plane flight. So I said yes to that, started preparing for that. And it was during that time that I encountered young Christians who loved Jesus Christ, believed what the church taught, had good reasons, it seemed to me, for why they believed those things. They were very open and non-sarcastic and joyful, and it was in stark contrast to me and my friends, who wouldn't be able to open up to each other unless we had several beers in us at a party somewhere. That was very impressive. And yeah, it was during that time I encountered the person of Jesus Christ. My heart began to defrost. I began to see things differently, feel things differently, intuit the motions of my heart for the first time, or more powerfully, and came home like one of those happy Christians you meet after a conference who can seem a little insufferable. That was me.
And then
that's awesome.
How did that begin to shift those areas, if at all?
I think I started feeling guilty about it more.
Oh.
And I should have too, I suppose. I started going to confession quite regularly to confess these things. But the advice, even though the priests were sympathetic, the advice was just try your best, try harder. Unfortunately, there wasn't more advice than that. So I would find myself, going for weeks and then falling again and then going to confession, that kind of stuff. So, but I now knew it was wrong. I thought the idea of like looking upon a daughter of God, someone that Christ died for, as an object for my own selfish gratification wasn't acceptable. And so certainly tried there at that point to get over it.
I'm curious if your story is at all similar to mine. Like the first time I heard that it was wrong, I'm a similar age. And that felt so overwhelming to me because I didn't think it was possible to stop. Now that the expectation was, well, you got to stop all this because you might go to hell. That was kind of my narrative. It felt impossible to stop. And so then confession became my drive-through experience, like very, very regularly.
Yeah.
Was it similar for you that it was overwhelming to be like, this is really hard. This is a giant request from the church.
Telling me, this is the analogy I often use, telling me to just try harder against this temptation to look at porn would be like putting me in the ring with a UFC fighter and telling me just to do my best. Like I'll try, but I know how this will end, and that's an exhausting pattern of getting really worked up about this has to stop. I can't do this anymore. This is bloody well wrong. And that sort of resolution was usually on the heels of a sexual fall when you can see clearly what it is you just did. And then a day later, and we'll do it again. Like that's just an exhausting way to live. And I think at the time I was employing perhaps, those very unsophisticated methods of trying to quit. Like, well, just, I don't know, keep your computer in a high visibility part of the room or that kind of thing. Right. Just pray more. And then you get to a point where you're like, okay, either God doesn't care about me or he doesn't exist. Because I know he doesn't want me to do this, and I'm trying really hard not to, but I guess not as hard as I should. So then it's just like that self-condemnation. So it's like God doesn't exist, or he doesn't care about me, or he does care about me, but I'm this bad, like I'm this pathetic, and I just feel hopeless.
Man, I feel like you just read the mail of so many people out there in the dynamics of their hearts, because I've heard, Bob, I'm sure you have as well. I'm sure you have as well, Matt. And we all work in this area in varying ways. And that is exactly what I hear so many people say, that, oh, so I got to try harder. Okay. And that goes for a little while. That didn't work. Okay. I got to shame myself more. That'll somehow activate it. somebody's got a silver bullet out there, and it's the put the computer right. Why didn't I ever think of that? Right, like as if that's some magic solution.
Yeah, like this idea that there has to be some sort of code out there that I have to discover. So, and that code might be daily rosary, right? Maybe I'm wearing the wrong colored scapula, or maybe this holy dude just needs to pray over me, because you hear stories, don't you? During that hopeless time, you hear stories of others who recovered. Like, I just went to the confessional and fell on my knees, and the Lord freed me. And you're like, God, that sounds awesome. How do I do? I'll do that. And then I remember like experiencing some degree of freedom, and then constructing a narrative like the one I'd heard from someone else, only to have that fall through, and only to feel the hopelessness all the more. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, you're speaking for so many.
Yeah, totally.
So how did that begin to shift? I mean, what started to shift?
I was living in Ireland a couple of years into my marriage, maybe even a year and a half. And of course, the shame is all the greater now that I have this lovely wife and this beautiful child. And what kind of piece of crap am I, masturbating to pixels on a screen? Like, what is this? It was just the self-hatred again, the shame. And finally, I think was honest with my wife for the first time. I think whenever I was honest with her before, it was more like, well, this is something I used to do, but just kind of being really honest about it. That was difficult. She received that quite well, actually. She was grateful that I was honest with her. That was helpful. During that time, I got serious about recovery. I got serious about prayer. And for about a year, I didn't fall to masturbation or pornography. And this is interesting, because this will destroy the "and then everything was good" narrative that we would like to be true of ourselves. I started praying the rosary every day, and then like that became what I told everyone. I found the bloody formula. You just have to consecrate yourself to the Blessed Virgin Mary. And at this point, I'm even giving talks on it. And I gave this big talk at this conference one year about this, and like, with tremendous passion and tremendous sincerity. And then maybe a few months after that, crashed and burned. And then it's like, well, now what do I do? Like, there's this narrative I've been telling people that isn't true anymore. Do I just ride this one out? Or do I be honest? And I thank God I had to give a talk at the same conference to the same group of people. And I was like, last year I said this, and I just want to be honest with you and say, yeah, here I am again.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge courage.
I think the healing really came in when I started just to be really honest and learned the language about, the kind of the activation sequence that Dr. Kevin Skinner talks about, understanding our triggers, understanding pornography and masturbation as a means to soothe our emotional affect, recognizing that self-condemnation after a sexual fall was actually counterproductive, beginning to see freedom from pornography not so much as a destination I reach after doing X, Y, and Z, but instead a daily choice that I make by my actions, allowing people I love to know about these things that I'm still struggling with so that I don't begin to live a false life. Those sorts of things. That was the sort of advice and help that I think is continuing to work today.
Yeah. And how old were you when that started?
Well, let's see. I'm 30, believe it or not, 38. I'm 38 now. That may have been around 28 or 30.
Okay.
Wow. I feel like pornography recovery, sort of the understanding of pornography addiction, the understanding of pornography recovery, has just gotten a ton more sophisticated and helpful over the last, say, 15 years.
Yeah, yeah, and you've been part of that process for others also. When you talked about recovery, were you doing 12-step work?
I wish I did, but I didn't. I sometimes wonder if that would be a blessing even now. But no, I never engaged in that. But I know of many people who say it was just such a blessing for them.
Matt, there's something kind of between the lines here that you're saying that I feel like we have to talk about, and I think I believe this. You'd probably be somebody who'd very capable of talking about it. You described to me, I knew and still know the exact same narrative of, what's the silver bullet, all that kind of stuff. I got to figure this out. I got it. Because whoever out there thinks, oh, I'll find the pornography silver bullet. Like, just wait a week, because then there'll be a whole other gigantic thing in your soul that you've got to address.
Yeah.
And so whether it's pornography or something else, like
Yeah.
there's this, the thing between the lines I feel like you're saying is, and I don't know if I can articulate it clearly, but boy, is this really important in the restoration journey. Like, this is how I've said it out loud, and I hope it makes sense. Why is church the last place we feel comfortable to address these issues? Like, why is it that this could just be my experience, but I feel like if I walk into a church setting, it's like, nope, can't be honest here, but I can go over to AA, or I can go over to these other things, and I can start to actually be honest about what's going on in my life. I think there's a shift in that currently, maybe in the last several years, but if you go back a little bit, and I'm not trying to get into traditional or not, that's not the point at all, but I think like there's a message or maybe a lie or a belief that everybody believes I've got to have it together before I enter the doors. And if I don't have it together, I can't talk about that. I can't allude to that. Keep it hidden, put up a good face. I think a lot of people struggle with that they don't feel received
Yeah.
or welcomed. Like, why is that? Do you have a thought about
I
that?
think in part, when people come together for a 12-step meeting, it's with the understanding that I am here to reveal things that I don't want to reveal. And I think that's just a different experience than when you enter a building with 100+ people for Holy Mass or something. Like, I don't want to be, and nor do I think I ought to be, vulnerable to 100+ people that I don't even know the names of. So in that sense, I suppose I can understand why people may not wish to be vulnerable in a setting like that. They might be being vulnerable in the confessional. But yeah, I see your point. It's like, here's what's acceptable. It's acceptable to come together and to tell you that I once had a problem with this. Here's what's not acceptable. I used to have a problem with this, and sometimes I think it's getting better, but sometimes it's not, and I still sometimes do this, and I don't know if that's okay.
Yeah, right.
But maybe men's groups and AA and SA rather are the places where we are seeing that taking place. And
I think, I mean, if I put it back to the apostles and just if I follow their journey, so they had the initial time, like, wow, maybe Peter, James, and John were like elbowing each other, like, man, this is crazy. We're in the inner circle. This guy's nuts. But clearly, Peter doesn't have his act together. Clearly, all of them don't have their act together. And it's this, I don't understand it, because there's something very, I don't know, attractive. I don't know if that's the right word. I want to be in that circle where I'm challenged to continue to grow, but I know I'm loved if I'm still struggling. But that's not just some stupid cliche that we throw around at each other and go, yeah, I'm with you. Yeah. Because I think that's a bunch of crap as well. Where you get sometimes, I've seen this in accountability groups. Like, you get into an accountability group and they'll be like, I fell again. And they go, yeah, me too. And that's it. I'm like, I don't know if that's really what the accountability group was for. Because if you're trying to love the man, you need a little bit more than, yeah, I hear you. My point being, Paul, like, probably the greatest Christian hero, like, outside of Jesus, who just poured his life out. He's got something going on. Everybody likes to say that it's a sexual problem. Maybe it is, and somewhere in the Greek you can read that. I don't know. But he has some kind of problem still happening. And he talks about boasting of his weakness. I'm like, that is a different narrative that goes on for a lot of folks.
Amen.
I just want to acknowledge that for people, that the struggle could continue and you're still loved and it doesn't disqualify you. I think that's the word. We feel disqualified. Like, somehow I'm disqualified from the people of God, from the church, from the whatever. I don't know. I just want to speak that out loud, because I've got many areas in my life that are disqualifiable or however, I still go to therapy with my wife because we need it and we have to. I'm not put together, Maybe it's the leader thing where we want our leaders to be perfect, and I don't know. I feel like I'm floundering around here trying to put my finger on something, but
you add to that, it's not as though, again, the whole nature of compulsion, it's not as though it's an active choice once you've decided that you want to get freed from it. It's like you are choosing, but there's places where, like both of your stories, how young it was that started. There was a trap that was set at an early age. In my own experience, I'd look at finding Playboys and, just being drawn to that. It's like this place where we're young and we get trapped young, and then the shame comes in, and then the pattern develops. And I think that's the picture of compassion that we need to have. Is it's not only that we got drawn into a natural desire, but we got drawn into a trap. And the trap is all the other stuff we bring into it that hasn't been healed in our life. And so to expect that all that's going to get healed in an instant, even if somebody's able to exercise self-control and not engage in a particular behavior, doesn't mean the healing has taken place. And it doesn't mean there's not remnants of that are permeating in all places of life. And so I think in that sense, it's that honesty to say, we're all in a process. It's everything we've been focusing on this podcast, from the beginning, is we're all in a process of healing. None of us have healed completely. Even if we're freed of a particular behavior, there's so much stuff underneath it that still needs healing. Thoughts on that, Matt?
Well, I think it's so important that we realize that we exist in a spiritual battle. You think of Frodo Baggins, right, who's pierced by the sword of the Nazgul and then is healed in Rivendell. He's not shamed for being pierced. That's sort of to be expected, since evil is pursuing him and trying to destroy him. And before I said either God exists and doesn't care, or he doesn't exist, or I'm screwing it up. Like, there's another option, and that is exists an enemy of our souls who has set a trap, to use Bob's words, to take us out. And so sometimes this talk of the demonic and Satan is only associated with sort of more conservative circles. And so you think, well, if I'm trying to kind of find freedom and healing, do I have to navigate away from that? It's like, no, because you have to navigate more into it. I've said this before, like trying to understand the Lord of the Rings without reference to Sauron is a pretty lame way of explaining the Lord of the Rings. There was this ring and it was awful and it wasn't conducive to the flourishing of Hobbiton, so they got rid of it and things were really good after that. It's like, okay, that's often how we talk about Christianity. God exists, he loves you, he desires to save you from your sin, and so he did that. And you're like, oh, but what about Sauron? Like, what about the enemy who's pursuing me? So when I look back on my own story, I see how the enemy and his minions tried to take me out. And just lately, these last few weeks, what the Lord's been revealing in prayer, and it's funny, I was totally I totally had forgotten about I boast in my weakness, but I was sitting before adoration. I said, Jesus, I thank you for my sins. And I felt bad saying that because I knew I meant something real, but I wasn't sure how to articulate it in a non-heretical way. But I was like, I thank you for my desire to look at porn. I thank you when I get too angry at the kids. I thank you for my temper. I thank you that I'm selfish and I don't know how to anticipate my wife's needs, and that I'm egotistical and I expect people to recognize me at Catholic events. And I thank, and I thank you for my self-hatred. I thank you for my self-sufficiency, because it's by these things that you're breaking open my heart, and you're creating these like caverns to fill with your spirit. And I knew I was saying something as true as I've ever said, but I wasn't terribly sure what I was saying. And it was just the next week on Sunday Mass, I hear Paul say that very thing. I boast in my weakness. I'm like, well, that must have been what I meant. You know, because like these things that I'm so deeply ashamed of and don't want you to know about it, like breaking through the facade, which I keep putting up in front of people, hoping they'll accept it. And these things I'm deeply ashamed about bursted open, and I find out I was acceptable all along. And now I got to begin living in that, you know, and that's a lot easier way to live.
Oh,
yeah.
Man, I just say, listeners, go back and repeat what Matt just said and sit with that in your prayer time, because there's something so holy about that. Because I feel like what we're doing is we're not finding camps to go and hide in and disagree. I think Lord of the Rings is an awesome example. I'm actually rewatching all the Hobbit movies. Okay, just as a footnote, that's cheap that Peter Jackson made 3 Hobbit movies, and I'm like, come on, that was such. Anyway, okay, that's just my little beef there. But so I'm watching it with my youngest, and like there's so much that's rich that's there. But Matt, what you're saying is so powerful and so real and so worthwhile, because the camps are exactly like Tolkien captures it, where the elves are ticked off at the dwarves. They're supposed to be on the same team because they've got one common enemy that's ironically more unified than the others, and they come into slaughter. That's the one we just watched. And it was until once they got unified, hope returned. And I feel like that, you know, like you're saying, Matt, this side of the camp says, oh, we got to emphasize the devil. Well, this side says we got to emphasize compassion. And I'm saying, well, how about both are extremely important? And we get on the same page with both, because I need both. I know that's my story. I need somebody like Christopher West is a good friend. I know Matt, he's a good friend. He's a good friend of all of ours. Right? Christopher like rocked my world, like Mick in the corner with Rocky, just like, what is wrong with you? Pull yourself together. And then Christopher's best friend, Tom McCabe, was the guy who was saying, you're a beloved son. You're loved. Hold your head high. And I'm like, hold my head high? Are you crazy? I just told my wife the worst things I could tell a human being. And he's like, hold your head high. You're a beloved son. You're loved. I needed both. It wasn't that I needed one I needed both, and both in the right dose and time. It's just hard when that division affects people's journey. I just feel for people that you do need compassion. And I'm hearing you say that, Matt. You have and do need compassion, as well as a serious, exhortation to come away from sin and to acknowledge the battle that's before you. Both are really important.
Jake,
is that fair to say?
I don't know if you're comfortable, but can you share your experience with Christopher in the coffee shop?
Sure. Yeah. Very, very simply, but I'm meeting with him in the coffee shop at 7:30 in the morning at Panera Bread in Denver, Colorado. And I say to him, Christopher, I can't do this. I can't beat pornography. I can't. It's impossible. That's too big. So exactly, Matt, the UFC fighter, I felt exactly. I didn't even feel like, I felt like I don't even know. It was impossible. And he took his fists and he started slamming them on the coffee table and saying, you will not let the sin of masturbation defeat you. And he's saying it like way too loud. And everybody in the coffee shop pauses and they turn over and look. And I'm like, shut up, man. Shut up. What are you doing? I was so embarrassed. The forks literally were hopping on the table as he was smashing his fists on the ground. That was so embarrassing. And at the same time, I needed somebody to be that passionate about my well-being. I needed somebody to give a damn that much about it. Like he was Gandalf in that moment for me.
Yeah.
Like he was like fighting for me when I was rolling over, with the Morgul blade in me. So that was, I just feel like we need both.
Yeah.
Matt, how have you found that as well?
Both what? The compassion and the exhortation?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a good question, isn't it? Absolutely. I mean, it's like we need to fight pornography. Like, or put it this way, if you discovered that you had an aggressive form of cancer today, how much would be too much to spend? Where would be too far to travel? What would you be unwilling to do if you had the hope of being healed of it, from it? And the fact is that sexual sin destroys us and can send us to hell. Now, that you might not be in a place where that's helpful to hear, and yet it remains true. So the point is, I need to be more serious about my sexual sin and any serious sin I'm engaged in than I am about something that only kills the body. Now, but if you hear that and you've been trying your whole life and think there's something fundamentally wrong with you because apparently other people are able to find long-lasting freedom from this, but for the life of you, you can't, that just feels like a hopeless thing to say. But when I say like, well, you got to get more serious about this than cancer, it's like it's more serious about your own healing. It's not more serious about white-knuckling it. Like you just have to be more white-knuckled. You have to be more angry at yourself. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying is you need to be able to drop the facade and go to SA, go to Dr. Bob's retreat, stop listening to Ben Shapiro and listen to your podcast, right? Stop, you got to, and that's the place I'm in right now as I sit here. Like, Jesus, I know you want to make me a saint and a great saint, and you will do it. And I thank you that you will do it. Even though I've got no merits of my own, you be my merits. I trust in you. You wouldn't inspire this desire to be a great saint within me unless you could fulfill it, and you will fulfill it. And I thank you that you are fulfilling it. So I don't know, like freedom from sin, thinking of it more from the aspect of heal my nature, heal me so that I can be free of these things that cause me and others pain.
Yes. Oh, when you said cancer, I think that's such an awesome analogy. And if we take it one step further, right now there's no clear cure for cancer. There is for sin. There is a clear cure. And that's the dilemma, is that I've known in my life when I take, this might sound weird, I'm blending analogies here, but when I take the Christian chemotherapy, like it'll make you throw up at times. It's not fun. It doesn't always feel good. It's not always great. But I can fall into the trap of saying, I don't know if this is going to work. I think I was duped. I think the prescription's wrong. It's taking too long. Look, my hair's falling out. All this garbage is happening. And that's the difference between cancer and sin, is that do I trust and believe that the doctors got it right, that there is a clear cure and that it is the best way? And would I do anything would I drop everything to follow him? Because, man, people do that for Oprah because they believe that she's got something worthwhile, or they do it for Dr. Oz or whoever the heck the most recent person is that people go for life, right? I want life.
Yeah. The other piece of that, though, is that with pornography, as you described in the beginning, Matt, there's a part of us that really desires something. And so it's not like we're wholeheartedly wanting to get free. There's still a part of us.
That's very good, Bob. That's a great distinction.
There's still a part of us that's desiring the very thing.
Absolutely.
And that ambivalence is a lot of times what keeps us bound. That's it.
Thank you for saying that. That's really going to help me as I try to articulate this better, because there's no part of the person who has cancer where he really likes the cancer. But there is a part of me that really likes the porn. And there's times when I'm stressed out, or my wife is sick, or, whatever. It's like, I actually really, really, really like this. And it actually really, really delivered,
Yeah.
And acknowledging that is a helpful, very, even necessary thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's a couple of pieces to that. One is there's the natural attraction to pleasure, to beauty, to all of that you described with the Wonder Woman, or Catwoman? Yeah.
Both.
That's just a natural desire of a way that a man's wired. But secondly, all the ways in which it medicates, all the ways in which it fills the pain of abandonment, the pain of being alone, the pain of rejection, all the things that you described in teenage years, that we all know as men that are places that if I have to face this pain, it's easier to medicate it and then face the pain of having shame than it is to face the pain of being alone, or face the pain of feeling rejected, or all of those places. So, and again, that's where the spiritual warfare comes in. There's real strongholds that get set up there. And so we're battling not against flesh and blood only, our own desires, but we're battling against strongholds, against principalities and powers that we've gotten a hold in our life, and not only of our life, but of our culture. And, these strongholds are powerful. And so it's not going to be a battle we're going to win by ourselves. It's a battle that prayer is necessary, but prayer and the willingness to allow that encounter to come to the deepest places of our brokenness, where the abandonment is, where the pain is, because otherwise we're going to constantly medicate and substitute the false thing for the real thing. And it does satiate. It doesn't satisfy, but it satiates.
Yeah, amen and amen. That's so important what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say a couple other places too. That the reason why we need mercy is for our shame. The reason why we need encouragement is for our hopelessness. The reason why we need spiritual prayer and battle is because there's real strongholds. But we also need help because none of us can get to those places by ourselves. We need each other to walk into that.
Matt, there's a lot of points that I want to go back and listen to. There's two things I'd love to talk. This question keeps coming up in my heart as we're talking, and then I'll ask it here, Matt, and let you just play with it and flesh that out. And then I want to hear about the work that you've done with helping other people, because we'll talk about that in a second. So here, first, the question. You're acknowledging, just with a lot of dignity, the journey that you've gone through. And I'm curious if you now, as the man you are now, could go and say to yourself before, hey, like, don't do this. That I'm thinking more of a fatherly sentiment. What would you say to yourself back in various zones and spots along the way?
Oh my golly. Yeah. I just want to hold little 8-year-old Matt Fradd, just love him, tell him he's good and powerful. There are certain things that make life ugly, and this is one of those things, and that I don't have to have an ugly life. That's the first sort of thing that comes to mind. I think if I could speak to Matt Fradd as a 20-year-old who's very, very angry at himself, I just want to keep holding me. I just want to go back and be like, oh, awesome, my brother, I love you. You're good. And the Lord is not scandalized by you. He knows what it is that you're seeking, but it can't be found here. Why do you seek the living among the dead? Yeah. Yeah, like even to say to 20-year-old me, look, pornography tried to serve a role, and in some sense it did, but we need to now break up with it. We need to say goodbye to it. And that's going to be hard. It's going to be hard, not just because it's difficult to do, because you might have some sort of compulsion, but because it actually gave you something. And it's hard to break up with something that's been helping. But and I'm taking this language from Father Sean Kilcoley, like you have to fire it now. Like you'll have to grieve it. You'll have to grieve the loss of this thing, but you're going to need something else because this isn't working. I don't know.
Yeah. I have a follow-up question with it. Just as you're describing you hugging yourself, how have you experienced Jesus with the 8-year-old boy and the 20-year-old man?
Yeah, just tremendous mercy, tenderness, understanding. Just like it'd be, let's keep using Lord of the Rings analogies. It would be like Gandalf in front of an orc. Like, please, that's cute, but like it's not a big deal here. Like we got this. Just like our Lord, sees my brokenness and sinfulness and doesn't look away and doesn't flinch and doesn't isn't terrified.
And then what happens inside of you when you see him looking at you that way?
My shoulders drop and I realize that I don't have to save the world or myself.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Awesome.
That's beautiful. Matt, tell us a little bit about the work that you've done in helping other people. I would say that there's a lot of people who've done a lot of theory work, and that's very important. You've been one of the people who I really think have pioneered the shovel meat in the dirt kind of work, that the real stuff. And so you've been doing this for a while. Like, where would you point people, now that we've had a chance to hear that this is something you have journeyed in, and you've got resources. And again, this is not shameless plugs to go to mattfradd.com. Like, it's sincere. These are real remedies to the cancer of in a sort. So what would you say?
Yeah, so I don't know if I've really done a lot to help people with their own healing process. I think I wrote a book that I'm very proud of called The Porn Myth, which you might think of as an apologetic against pornography. It's not a religious book. There's no reference to scripture or Jesus or prayer or sin. It's basically takes about 28 myths we often believe about pornography and shows why there's good reasons, both logically and scientifically, to think these things are false. But as far as like the deep healing, but then after you've been convinced of it, there's certain things I would point to, like Dr. Kevin Skinner is, I think, magnificent. He wrote a book called, do you know, Pornography Addiction or something?
We'll find a link for it and put it in the show notes.
Father Sean Kilcoley, I think, is doing really beautiful work in this area.
Your podcast with him was excellent. I would recommend people
they could listen
to that.
Maybe realizing too that the problem, this issue of pornography, it's not about pornography. Like, it's about, as we've been talking about, like intimacy and shame and fear. And so in that sense, like, you want to be free from pornography, like, you may not need to look at it head on. You might need therapy. You might need to keep listening to this podcast or go back and listen to all of it. I don't mean this individual episode. I mean all of the episodes, or to go on one of these retreats with Dr. Bob or something like that. Those, I think, would be more helpful. But as far as, like, for my book, if I was to plug my book, I would say my book does a really good job at convincing you that pornography is awful and not a way to be happy. And also 100% of the royalties from that book, or the ebook, or the audio book, The Porn Myth, go to help sexually trafficked victims in San Diego. So I'm not just telling people to get it, because I make 0 cents from the book, right? It's just, I think it's a good book, and I put a lot of effort into it, and it's very well researched. And there's about 30 pages in the bibliography from peer-reviewed sources and experts in the field. So it's like a good book to give to someone who's kind of open to quitting porn, but isn't open to a religious argument.
How about Strive 21?
Strive 21 is a course I created for people to go through. It's a 21-day detox from porn course. The idea is, if I had 21 days with you and we could meet for coffee each of those days, what would I say? What would I challenge you to do that day? So it's a free course. People don't have to pay a cent. It's 100% free, 100% anonymous, for men only. They could go through that. And then a friend of mine started a website for women struggling with pornography called, I think it's Magdala Ministries. You'll have to find that link. Her name's Rachel. I just had her on my show as well. So maybe link to that conversation with her and that conversation with Father Sean might be two good places to start.
Great.
And you and Jason Everett just wrote a book together, Forge.
There's a lot of...
You've been working hard.
Yeah. So that's a really good book as well. It's a 33-day journey. And this is a kind of book, like, I wouldn't give The Porn Myth to a 14-year-old. I'd read it first because there's some pretty intense content in there. But Forged, I kind of think you could. It's definitely based in the Catholic tradition. When you sign up, you text Forge to a number, and then you get accompanying videos sent to your email for those 33 days from people like Sister Miriam James, Father Jacques Philippe, it's Father Mike Schmitz, I'm not sure, for those 33 days. So that's also an option.
That's so good. Bob, any kind of final thoughts, reflections?
I was thinking, for Matt, what would, just kind of in summary, how would you encourage everybody that's listening?
I would say that admitting to one's own pornography use, sharing that with perhaps a spouse, looks like Good Friday, but it's the only way through to Easter Sunday, and it's terrifying. But what's your options? You know, sometimes it's helpful to realize you have options. Like, you don't have to be healed if you don't want to. You and I can keep going down this dead-end road that porn has us on. That's an option for you. Go for it. Like, it's within your control. You know, you don't have to be well. You don't have to be healed. And I think sometimes saying that is helpful to those who are like, I don't know how to be healed. Well, if continuing down this dead-end road isn't an option for you, which I hope it's not, then whether or not you see clearly through to the other side, it's worth the journey. So just keep going down it. And I would say that some things can only be healed by the antiseptic light of truth. And so exposing this, opening it up before friends and loved ones in a prudent way is also a necessary part of the journey, I think.
Yeah. Amen.
Amen. Matt, thanks so much for being with us again. I just want to bless you and affirm you. Like, you're on the narrow way, and it's very clear.
Thank you.
And I want to, like, sincerely, like, you are clearly in the trenches in your own life, working through things and becoming a great saint. So just well done. And it's an honor to know that you're out there fighting the good fight along with us. So, like, I hope that people will hear from you your heart today, because it's beautiful to hear your heart and to receive you. And I think it's very powerful to hear your story. So thanks again for being with us. And we'll have all kinds of links in the show notes, listeners, for you to hear more about Matt and all the stuff that we referenced today. But it's our prayer that all of us would continue on the healing journey of knowing the love and mercy of God.